أناجي الحق في ليل بهيم أصدق النجوى وأدعو الله من قلب سليم يطلب التقوى أناجي الحق في ليل بهيم أصدق النجوى وأدعو الله من قلب سليم يطلب التقوى.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Ahlan wa sahlan wa marhaban bikum, and welcome to another edition of Perspective. My name is Faizel Patel. A significant number of South Africans, anti-apartheid activists, church leaders, government officials, trade unions, and even political parties as well as civil society organizations have expressed their support for the Palestine freedom fighter and icon Leila Khaled's visit to South Africa. Leila Khaled has been to South Africa on numerous occasions, but this visit is hosted by the South African Palestine Solidarity and Human Rights Organization, PDS South Africa. Now, to tell us more about Leila Khaled and her visit to South Africa, in studio this evening we have Muhammed Desai from BDS. Assalamu alaikum, Muhammad, and welcome to Perspective.
Welcome, salam. Jazakallah so much for having me.
First and foremost, for our viewers that may not know who Leila Khaled is, maybe you can tell us who she is and what does she do?
Well, beyond the living legend that Leila Khaled is, Leila Khaled, of course, took the Palestinian struggle to new heights during the 1970s. People of my father's generation and of that category of people will recall that in the 1970s, Leila Khaled was part of a group of Palestinian freedom fighters that actually partook in the very radical act, some may call militant act, of hijacking an aeroplane and getting all the passengers off, using those passengers as for a prisoner swap. But in the process, the hijacking's main purpose was to put the Palestinian people and the Palestinian struggle on the international map. Because in many ways, the Palestinians there was an attempt to erase the Palestinian identity. We know, for example, the Israeli Prime Minister Golda Meir that said that there is no such thing as a Palestinian, the Palestinians don't exist. And so in many ways, the actions of Leila Khaled, together with her colleagues and with her comrades, put the Palestinian struggle on the world map. And I think that we should stress that the plane hijackings resulted, the first one resulted in no deaths whatsoever. The second one resulted in one death of one of the Palestinian, part of one of the members of the Palestinian freedom fighters. No passengers were harmed. This was really an act in which they went out of their way to ensure that no passenger or civilian was harmed in the process.
Okay. Now, you obviously did answer the next question I was going to ask. Leila Khaled has been dubbed the poster girl of the Palestinian struggle, like you mentioned. Her image flashed across the world. She hijacked the planes, like you mentioned, in 1969 specifically, and made world history, becoming the first woman to hijack an airplane. Obviously, you told us about this, but do you think in this day and time, in today's time, with the World Trade Center bombings, planes being hijacked, is it necessarily advocated to what she did so many years ago?
I think that firstly, Leila Khaled belongs to that group of people like Nelson Mandela, Che Guevara, and others. And these people participated in certain acts back then which may not necessarily be acceptable today. Or there may be a different context in which it is viewed in. For example, Nelson Mandela was part of the Umkhonto Wesizwe. The Umkhonto Wesizwe participated in sabotage acts. For example, taking down power stations. Today, if you were to participate in such an act, it will be considered criminal because it will be considered as a form of cable theft.
Yes.
But they are very different contexts of cable theft today and the sabotage acts of the 80s. So Leila Khaled belonged in an era in which the plane hijackings was a new form of struggle, was a new form of activity, and is very different to the plane hijackings of today. So as BDS South Africa, we do condemn all the forms of violence that we see, which people may call terrorism, but really the actions of Leila Khaled and her colleagues back then must be viewed in its context.
Okay. Bringing that into context specifically now, we know that during the apartheid years in South Africa, that Nelson Mandela and the ANC organization, many other organizations adopted the armed struggle. Do you think that the armed struggle is needed now to liberate the Palestinians from Israeli occupation, or do you think that's going a bit too far?
Look, BDS South Africa firstly respects international law. And as part of respecting that international law, we value and we respect the right of all oppressed people to take up arms in the defense of their self-determination or in the promotion of their self-determination. We're not going to impose our view. So whether I support the armed struggle or violence or not, I'm not going to impose this on the Palestinian people. It is up to them to decide the future of their struggle.
Yes. Okay. Leila Khaled, again, I want to touch on the hijackings again. Do you think her actions by hijacking the planes in 1969 and 70 did more for Palestine or for women around the world, or both?
Oh, absolutely. Many people, even up to today, name their daughters after Leila Khaled. You have Leila Issel, for example,
yes.
named by the famous UDF anti-apartheid struggle veteran Johnny Issel. He named his daughter Leila Issel. Leila Khaled and those plane hijackings really brought the Palestinian issue into the forefront when many people had forgotten about this issue and had no idea that there was a Palestinian struggle being waged. And when I say people, not only people in the Western world, but also in many of the Arab countries had forgotten about the Palestinian people.
Okay. Because of her actions in 1969 and 1970, is there any country in the world or any organization that sort of harbors any animosity towards what she did or towards her actions that was done so many years ago?
Well, many of the Western countries wouldn't allow Leila Khaled a visa. They wouldn't allow her into their countries. However, fortunately in South Africa, we have a very different experience. In South Africa, she's currently being welcomed by the Mkhonto Wesizwe Military Veterans Association. Various deputy ministers, government ministers, anti-apartheid icons are going to be sharing the stage with Leila Khaled when she is around. In fact, the Minister of Home Affairs, Malusi Gigaba, is going to be officially welcoming Leila Khaled when she lands at Oliver Tambo Airport. Now, the ANC, the larger liberation struggle, has a very much deep respect for people like Leila Khaled, Fidel Castro and others, which George Bush or the Western world may condemn, but we remember who were those that stood with us during the 1980s.
Okay, you mentioned the ANC, and we know that the ANC over the years have provided a lot of support for the Palestinian people. Over and above the ANC, and not to mention any political parties in particular, has any other party or opposition parties come to the fore to also highlight the visit by Leila Khaled and to also highlight the atrocities inflicted upon the Palestinian people by Israel in particular?
Well, whilst we acknowledge and we welcome the great strides taken by the ANC, for example, in terms of supporting the Palestinian struggle, we still want the ANC and our government to do more.
Yes.
We don't see a reason why we should have the Israeli embassy, for example, or the Israeli ambassador in this country sitting in Pretoria. But I think that the economic freedom fighters, Julius Malema in particular, has been very vocal in terms of the Palestinian struggle and supporting one of our consumer boycotts, the Boycott Woolworths campaign. But in general, the ANC has probably done the most for the Palestinian people in this country, both in terms of the time that the ANC has been in solidarity with the Palestinian people, but also the concrete actions taken by the ANC. For example, the National Executive Committee, the NEC, the highest decision-making body of the ANC, late last year adopted a resolution that no company involved in the occupied Palestinian territories or with the illegal Israeli settlements must have any sort of contract or must be given any government tender by the South African government. This resolution by the ANC's NEC is going to have widespread impact in the South African economy. Companies such as Group 4 Security or G4S or Caterpillar, because of the involvement in the occupied Palestinian territories, will now be excluded from South African government contracts. So beyond these parties, you do have some very reactionary organizations the Democratic Alliance refuses to come out and accept the comparison, for example, made by various of our senior leaders, including Archbishop Desmond Tutu, that the situation for Palestinians is similar to the situation under apartheid here in South Africa.
Okay. Now, in the award-winning documentary, Leila Khaled Hijacker, director Lina Makboul, herself a Palestinian, questions whether Leila's actions were good or bad for their people, with particularly reference to the hijacking. Your comments on that?
Well, the overflow of support on social media, the overflow of letters and emails that we have received from Palestinians as well as from South Africans has been overwhelming. I think that there are few people that are critical of what Leila Khaled and what some actions of the Palestinian struggle is taking. However, on the whole, Leila Khaled's visit to South Africa is very much welcome from the South African Students' Congress, the MKMVA, the Muslim Judicial Council, and various other organizations.
Okay. This evening we're speaking to Muhammed Desai from BDS, and we're talking about Leila Khaled's visit to South Africa. Yes, she has come to South Africa, and there are numerous engagements that she will be attending. Stay tuned to the program. We will mention this just towards the end, where you can attend some of these. We're going to go for a break. After the break, we will continue. Stay tuned.
أصدق النجوى وأدعو الله من قلب سليم يطلب التقوى إلهي صرت في ظرف عصيب فاكشف البلوى فيا ربي أنا.
Welcome back to Perspective. My name is Faizel Patel. This evening we're speaking to Muhammed Desai from BDS. We know that Leila Khaled is in South Africa, and she'll be visiting or doing various engagements. She's a Palestinian activist that hijacked planes in 1969 and 1970 to show or bring solidarity with the Palestinian people. Remember, you can interact with me by sending me a mail on faisal@itbnetworks.tv. Drop me a tweet on @Faizi143, or you can even comment on facebook.com/Faizel Patel. Now, Muhammad, before the break, we were speaking about Leila Khaled, about the plane hijackings, and how this obviously in support the armed struggle. We need to obviously take into cognizance that Leila is a Palestinian refugee, one of 6 million. Do you think, and I don't know if you can answer for her, do you think that she will still return one day to Palestine?
You know, during one of the hijackings that Leila Khaled was part of, she actually asked the pilot to fly over Israel. I think many Israelis were scared that she's going to throw the plane into Israel, but in fact, all that Leila Khaled wanted was to see the home and the city in which she came from, Haifa in particular. And I think that amongst all Palestinians, there's a deep sort of love for their homeland, and there's a deep sort of motivation to go back to where they came from. So I think that we are going to see a free Palestine in a few years' time, and I think that many Palestinians are going to make the trip to their homeland.
Okay. Now, one of the concerns that I have, and I'm sure many others would have as well, I seen a documentary on a mainstream channel in overseas. They had a documentary with particular reference to collaborators. Palestinian collaborators that are giving pertinent information to the Israeli government or to the IDF with regards to where certain leaders will be or would be. Obviously, this jeopardizes certain segments of the Palestinian struggle. What are your comments on that?
You know, the Israeli intelligence services are genius in some ways. The kind of attempts that they make to try to break up the Palestinian community and the Palestinian population. One method that they use is that they try to recruit collaborators. They often blackmail the Palestinian collaborators or those that will become collaborators. For example, they are spying continuously over the West Bank. They know exactly who your mother is, who your father is, who you met for lunch, who you met for breakfast, who you met the night before. And what the Israelis do is that they use this information to then create discontent amongst family members, friend and friend, mother and child, etc. And so this is really a reflection of the larger Israeli regime and the kind of ways in which the Israeli regime is trying to enforce a sort of control on the Palestinian people. But there were similar attempts made here in South Africa. There were attempts to recruit collaborators. And it's a very tragic space. It's a very tragic topic, but it does exist.
Okay. Now, we know that there's other atrocities taking place across the world, whether it's in Chechnya, South Sudan, we're talking about Boko Haram in Nigeria. Why has Palestine, specifically in your opinion, become such a symbol for solidarity? Last year I had Dr. Mads Gilbert on, and he summed up in a way that, when you see the Palestinians, how they're suffering. But in your opinion, what has made Palestine such a symbol for solidarity across the world and even in South Africa?
I don't think we should play the game of which victim is more important than the other, which killing is more important than the other. All killings are tragic, all killings are unacceptable. However, at the same time, I do think that certain struggles have a certain era that they live in. And so, for example, you have the era of the anti-Vietnam War, the anti-war peace movement. You have the era of the anti-apartheid movement. And we're currently living in the era of the Palestinian solidarity movement. You see the Palestinian solidarity protests that are taking place across the world. You see them being filled by millions of people. You see Israel becoming increasingly isolated from the world's economy and from the world's populations. You see various companies imposing sanctions on Israel. You see various companies and CEOs withdrawing their entities from Israel. And so I really think that we are living in a time which is going to be historic very soon. We're living in a time of the process to see a free Palestine.
Okay. I'm going to digress away from Leila, Khaled. While we have you in studio, we understand that the Israeli Apartheid Week will be taking place in March this year. Can you give us more details in what BDS has planned or what is planned specifically for South African Israeli Apartheid Week?
Well, Israeli Apartheid Week is now in its 11th year. It started off in Canada in just 1 or 2 universities, and it has spread now to over 248 cities across the world. Yes. We're talking about events in Ramallah, in Toronto, in New York, in Washington, in Brussels, in London, etc. And of course locally here in South Africa. In South Africa, we hope to be seeing 45 universities, towns and cities participating in Israeli Apartheid Week. Yes. And Israeli Apartheid Week is really an awareness-raising campaign that elaborates the comparison between apartheid South Africa and modern-day Israel. So it's one of our largest awareness-raising campaigns for the year. It's an international campaign. It will be taking place in South Africa between the 2nd and the 8th of March. We're going to be seeing just over 70 or 75 South African organizations endorsing the campaign and participating in the campaign. And we're really calling on members of the community, members of the public, either come through to one of the events that will be taking place in that week of the first week of March, or decide to organize your own event in whichever city or town that you may be in. BDS South Africa is one of the participating organizations, and if you need any information on the campaign, you can be in touch with our organization.
Okay. Speaking about the Israeli Apartheid Week again, any high-profile speakers that will sort of engage our viewers, that will entice them to come to one of the many speeches or sort of segments that's taking place?
Well, in addition to the sort of South African celebrities that will come out and the South African anti-apartheid icons and government ministers that will be participating in the week, we are also going to be hosting Rafeef Ziada, who is a Palestinian spoken word artist. So we hope to host her in the first part of Israeli Apartheid Week here in South Africa. Many people may know her poems from YouTube and elsewhere. But in addition to Rafeef Ziada, this year we're also going to be hosting a person from the Palestinian Christian community, somebody from Bethlehem in particular, that will be coming through to join us here in South Africa. So these are some of the speakers, but of course there'll be many movies and documentaries and other things that will be forming part of Israeli Apartheid Week.
Okay. While we're off the topic of Leila, Khaled, your Woolworths campaign has been successful last year. Speaking about that particular campaign, what have you got planned for the new year and how has it been going so far?
Well, the Boycott Woolworths campaign really took the BDS movement by storm here in South Africa. It's proven to be successful both in terms of the PR impact that it's had on the company, but also on the finances of the company. A Wits University report has found that the company is losing about 8 million rands a month as a minimum due to the boycott. But in addition, what the Boycott Woolworths campaign has done is that it's taken this thing called BDS, this abstract concept to some extent, and it has made it accessible for any person out there, any community member, to participate in the BDS movement through the Boycott Woolworths campaign. So we're going to be having this year these monthly National Days of Action on the last Saturday of every month, but we're also going to be taking the campaign into newer cities and towns that we didn't previously have access to, or we didn't previously have a footprint. So we really would also like to acknowledge and commend and salute the various members of the community and the public out there that have given the muscle to this campaign that has made it so successful. We are currently in engagements with the Woolworths who in the past previously refused to meet with us. We are currently in engagements with them, and we do hope to see Woolworths ending that trade relationship with Israel very soon.
Okay, just briefly, we just got a few minutes left. Mahmoud Abbas was in South Africa last year. Was BDS involved in his visit, and have you guys met him?
Well, Mahmoud Abbas came here on a state visit, invited by the South African President Zuma. There are also plans for the leadership of Hamas to come through on the invitation of the President. But BDS South Africa did have an engagement with President Abbas where we discussed the growing BDS movement in this country, or various of our campaigns that are coming up. And both President Abbas as well as those that were with him were very excited and enthusiastic to hear about the work that is currently undertaken.
Okay, finally, obviously, back to Leila Khaled now. We know that she will be at various functions in South Africa. Maybe just to enlighten our viewers where they can attend some of these functions, where they can get details from, and your last comments.
Well, we are a bit embarrassed that we are charging people to be at the Leila Khaled functions, but one of the reasons that she's coming out here is on a fundraising tour, because we need to pay for BDS South Africa and the campaigns that we run out. Leila Khaled will be welcomed to South Africa by the Minister of Home Affairs and by the anti-apartheid icon Ahmed Kathrada on Friday the 6th of February. She'll then be having her first public dinner, fundraising dinner in Pretoria that evening on Friday the 6th. The next day, Saturday the 7th, she'll be joined by Obed Bapela, the head of the ANC's International Relations in Rustenburg. After that, she joins Ronnie Castrol's in Port Elizabeth at the fundraising lunch. On the Tuesday, she's in Durban in KZN, after which on Wednesday, she'll be in Newcastle. And on Thursday, the 12th of February, she'll be in Cape Town for the fundraising dinner.
All right. Muhammed Desai, absolute pleasure to have you in studio this evening, and all the best with Leila Khaled's tour.
Jazakallah so much.
Unfortunately, we've come to the end of another edition of Perspective. Inshallah, we will have some of those details of her itinerary on screen, so you can take note of that. Remember, you can interact with me. Send me a mail on Faizel@itvnetworks.tv. Drop me a tweet on @Faizi143, or even comment on facebook.com/Faizel Patel. From myself, Faizel Patel, and the magnificent team here at ITV, fi amanillah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
أناجي الحق في ليل بهيم أصدق النجوى وأدعو الله من قلب سليم يطلب التقوى أناجي الحق في ليل بهيم أصدق النجوى وأدعو الله من قلب سليم يطلب التقوى سرت في ظرف عصيب فاكشف البلوى فيا رب